I lived in Portland, a city where the rains didn't seem like the weather, but the mood. The locals got used to it a long time ago. Everyone had umbrellas, even the children, and still every day it looked as if the sky had failed again. After my divorce from Gavin, the fog began to seem especially appropriate to me, as if the city was grieving with me. The house I got from the court was in Beaverton, on a quiet maple-lined street where free newspapers were on the doorsteps in the morning, and neighbors nodded politely to each other, even if they didn't know the names. My house was a 2-story brick building with white shutters and a lopsided mailbox. He seemed to me both a fortress and an emptiness. Gavin left with his assistant, and suddenly there was too much silence in my life. I clung to my work like a lifeline. The marketing agency in the southwest of the city, where I have worked for the last 7 years, promised promotion. I wanted to believe that my new position would help me break out of the sticky swamp of loneliness. And before we continue, write in the comments from which city you are watching this video. Enjoy watching. That day, I was sitting in a coffee shop across from the office, a small, cozy place with wooden tables, fogged windows, and the smell of caramel lurking in every corner. I was drinking a vanilla latte and sorting through my mail when the phone rang. A name appeared on the screen, Mom. A chill came over me. I almost dropped the cup. We hadn't spoken to her since Christmas, and then it all came down to exchanging routine greetings. My mother and I never had that bonding tenderness that they write about in books. She was always reserved, almost indifferent. As a child, it seemed to me that I had to earn her gaze, her approval. My older sister Liana, on the other hand, didn't have to do anything. She was a favorite. And she still was. I hesitated, but I answered anyway. "Hi, Mom," I said carefully, a little quieter than I had intended. "Julia, honey, hello." Her voice was soft, almost alien. I tensed up. My mother didn't use endearments unless there was a reason. "This is unexpected." I took a sip, feeling my palms grow cold. "I was just thinking. We haven't seen each other for a long time. Tom and I were just saying that you're probably lonely after. Well, you know. The divorce." I paused. The mention of Gavin caused a familiar ache in his chest, like pressing on an unhealed wound. "I'm doing fine," I replied, trying to sound calm. "The work keeps you afloat." "That's good, honey. We decided to have a small family dinner here. This Saturday. We would like you to come." I was confused. It wasn't like my mother. Dinner? A family one? They always invited us formally, twice a year, for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Without warmth. Everything was meticulous, neat, and immaculately cold. And yet I said, "Good. I will." I guess I wanted to believe that everything would change now. That maybe the divorce gave us a chance to start over. Naivety, of course. But at that moment, I felt so tired of being alone that I grabbed onto this offer like a lifeline. On Saturday, I parked at my parents' house. The rain was drizzling thinly, settling in drops on the windshield. The house looked the same as always: yellow siding, neat lawn, flag over the porch. But there was something wrong in the air. Dad opened the door before I could knock. He was wearing a warm cardigan and had a smile I hadn't seen on him in 10 years. "Julia. Come in, dear," he said and hugged me. Awkward. It was like he was impersonating a movie dad. In the kitchen, Mom was wiping her hands on her apron and looked at me with the same faint warmth. "Right on time. Dinner is almost ready." The table was set as if a Christmas fairy tale was waiting for us: a snow-white tablecloth, candles and glass candlesticks, and porcelain, which was usually brought out only on the most important holidays. It made me uneasy. My parents never made an event out of dinner. The evening went unexpectedly smoothly. We talked about a little bit of everything: work, repairs, recipes. Mom was interested in how my week was going, Dad asked about the prospects for a new position. I almost relaxed. And then, when we finished the blueberry pie, it started. Julia, your father and I wanted to talk about something, Mom began, pouring herself a cup of tea. It's a little awkward. I felt my heart tighten. Our house needs serious repairs, Dad continued. All the wiring is old, the pipes are leaking. We found contractors, but it'll take a few months, Mom interrupted. And it's impossible to live in such a house. Liana has 3 children. There is no extra space or peace. We don't want to spend money on food. That would be stupid. And you? You have so much space. She looked at me as if it was the most logical thing in the world. I put down my fork. Everything became clear. Do you want to move in with me? They exchanged glances. Just for a while, Mom said hurriedly. Until it's over. We won't cause you any problems, I promise. I looked at my parents. 2 people who had kept me at a distance all my life were now asking for asylum. And despite everything, I felt hope welling up in me. Maybe this is a chance to start over with a clean slate. Okay, I replied quietly. You can stay. I didn't know at that moment that I had started the countdown. The first weeks after my parents moved in with me were like a strange but not comfortless ritual. The house, which had been eerily quiet until recently, was now filled with voices, footsteps, the smells of fried bacon and morning coffee. In the morning, I would wake up to my father, Tom, coming down the stairs in his old slippers, making a sound like someone dragging sandbags across the floor. My mother, Martha, started the day by making omelets, rattling the pans and grumbling to herself if I forgot to defrost the chicken for dinner. She didn't ask, she just assumed the role of hostess, and I let her do it. Maybe because it was better than being alone. When I returned home after work, the aroma of fried potatoes or vegetable stew was already in the air. Mom was putting plates on the table, neatly folding napkins, as if we were going to meet guests. Dad was sitting in the living room, flipping channels and mumbling comments about the news. I passed by, nodded to him, and he nodded back. We hardly spoke, but there was no hostility in that silence. It's more a habit. How was your day? Mom asked when I sat down at the table. Tired, but not bad, I replied. She nodded, didn't insist, didn't dig deeper. And it was strange, and pleasant. I was starting to think that maybe this move could really be more than just a temporary inconvenience. That despite the years of distance, we can find a way to be a family. However, the peace turned out to be deceptive, like the surface of water before a storm. It started on Saturday. I woke up early, around 8, and, wearing sweatpants and an old college t-shirt, went downstairs to tidy up. Cleaning on weekends was a kind of therapy for me. I played classical music, most often Beethoven or Brahms, turned on the speaker in the kitchen and started with the dishes. This was how I put not only my house in order, but also my thoughts. Then I chose a Tchaikovsky concert. Strong, sharp chords filled the space. I was washing the sink when Mom appeared in the kitchen doorway. Her face was tense, her eyes narrowed, her lips compressed. Julia, could you turn down the music? Or it's better to turn it off altogether. Her voice was polite, but brooked no objections. I have a terrible headache. Migraine since the morning. I'm sorry, I said, reaching for the speaker. I'm just used to cleaning up to the music. When you live alone, you can do anything, she remarked, turning to leave. But you need to be more attentive to the guests. Those words stung me. I stood with a sponge in my hand and looked into the sink, as if I could find the answer in it. They are not just guests. They live here. I let them in. But I didn't say anything. In the afternoon we went to the supermarket together. Mom always insisted on buying groceries according to the list she made herself. When I reached for a can of organic beans, she bowed her head. "You're paying for this label," she said. "It's all marketing, Julia. Don't waste your money." I nodded slightly, but something prickled in my chest. This is my budget. My food. My choice. But I didn't say anything again. I told myself it was just a small thing. It's not worth blowing a storm out of them. A couple of days later, I discovered that they had put a thin mattress on top of my orthopedic. Mom explained that their backs were uncomfortable. My father said that my mattress was hard as a board. I didn't mind. Although it was a new mattress, an expensive one, chosen specifically for my back after years of suffering. But it's only temporary, right? When Melissa, my friend from work, came to see me the following Thursday, bringing me takeout and a bottle of wine, I was happy. We settled down on the couch, turned on the TV show and started talking. It was about 9 o'clock in the evening when my father appeared in the hallway. He stood like a shadow, arms crossed. "Julia, it's getting late," he said. "Your mom and I are trying to relax before going to bed." "I'm sorry, Dad," I replied, feeling Melissa give me a questioning look. When she left, Mom came up to me in the kitchen. "We don't want to make life difficult for you," she began, "but maybe we should avoid the guests tonight. We need peace and quiet." I nodded, gritting my teeth. And again, she didn't say anything. I wanted to scream, "This is my house, my rules, my walls." But the words stuck in my throat. I suppressed them the way I crushed weeds between my fingers, resolutely, but with self-loathing. Week after week, the list of unspoken grievances grew. Complaints became a familiar background. Mom asked me why I buy almond milk if cow's milk is cheaper. My father noticed that I was parking strangely in the garage. He moved my car once because it would be more careful this way. I felt like a guest. In my own house. I started coming in later, staying late at work, and staying in cafes. The house that was supposed to be my fortress has become a cage with soft walls. And I kept telling myself that it was temporary. The renovation of their house will end. We'll split up. And everything will be mine again. I just didn't know how long this temporary would last. Or how it will turn out. I returned home later than usual. It turned out to be a difficult day, a meeting, incessant correspondence, coffee, followed by another one, as if the infusion of cheerfulness could be measured in milliliters. I dreamed of silence, a hot tub, and an empty house where nothing would require my attention. The car turned slowly into the driveway, the rain pattering lightly on the windshield, leaving broken tracks. All the windows were lit inside the house. It was immediately alarming. I opened the door and immediately heard a screech. Not scared, but enthusiastic, childish. In the living room, Emma and Lucas, my sister Liana's children, have set up a real amusement park. Emma, a 7-year-old with thick red curls, was jumping on the couch, ignoring the flying pillows. Lucas, who was 5, was running around the room with a plastic airplane, leaving a trail of candy wrappers behind him. There are palm prints on the glass table, greasy and sticky, like a reminder of the chaos. "Hi, Aunt Jules." Emma screamed when she saw me. She was beaming like I was at a birthday party. "Hi, honey," I managed, holding back my irritation. "Where's Mom?" "In the kitchen with Grandma," she shouted before jumping back into the pillows. I walked slowly down the hallway, feeling the tension rise up my spine. Liana and Mom were sitting in the kitchen. They were both having cups of coffee, chatting as if they were in their own cozy world, where everything that happens in the house is just noise in the background. "Julia," Liana exclaimed, giving me a cursory glance. "I hope you don't mind that we dropped by." "Mom said you wouldn't mind." I looked at her, at my mom, who pretended to be too busy stirring sugar. I just wasn't expecting it. That's all, I said. There's so much space here, Mom interjected, looking up. Children can play freely, they feel good here. Liana's apartment is very cramped. It is useful for them to change the environment. I didn't say anything. What could I say? What do I need my personal space for? That I want to come home and not be afraid to step on a toy or hear crying behind the wall? I restrained myself. Again. I thought it was a casual visit. I was wrong. The very next week, everything happened again. In the beginning, the children just came to visit us after school. Then several nights in a row. And soon I had them every day. My parents turned into babysitters, willingly and enthusiastically. Liana dropped them off at our place while she stayed late at work. And all this happened without my consent, without my request. Just as a matter of course. I came home hoping for peace, but instead I opened the door to the noise, running around and markers scattered on the floor. The living room has become like a play area in a shopping mall. It got even worse on weekends. Liana came with her husband, Jason, and they had small parties, pizza, loud laughter, and conversations that echoed through my walls. And I went upstairs. She locked herself in her bedroom like a teenager trying to hide from her own parents. Only now I was an adult woman in a house that was registered in my name, in a house that I paid for. One evening, after the children had finally left, I was sitting in the kitchen and felt irritation spreading inside, like water in a saucepan before boiling. Mom was washing the dishes. I put down my mug and said, "I need to talk to you." Mom didn't turn around, just continued to rub the plate, as if she hadn't heard. But I knew she was listening. "I understand that you like it when Emma and Lucas are here. And it's nice to see them too. But I need some peace. I asked them to come less often. I'm getting tired. It's hard for me." Mom slowly put the plate in the dryer, wiped her hands on a towel, and turned to me. "Julia, these are your nephews. Family. Do you really want to limit their visits?" I looked into her eyes. There was no malice. Only slight disappointment and misunderstanding. "Yes. Want. I'm not saying I don't want to see them. I'm just asking for some space. This is my home. I need something personal." At that moment, my father entered the room. He heard the last words and looked at me with an expression as if I had said something blasphemous. "You're talking about boundaries," he began. "But this is a family. Should a family feel unwanted?" That phrase hit me harder than I expected. "A family should respect each other," I replied, and my voice trembled. "Rather than taking kindness for granted." Mom sighed heavily and shook her head. "You're ungrateful, Julia. We're doing our best. And you take everything with hostility." I didn't argue. There was no point anymore. I realized that for them, my yes, once said, became an invitation to manage my life. My home. My time. They didn't ask, they already thought they had the right. And that became the starting point. I realized that our fragile balance was beginning to crack at the seams. And next time, the crackling will be louder. That Saturday, the air in the house was unnaturally thick, like before a thunderstorm. I felt it from the doorway. The tension hung in the air like a heavy blanket covering the entire space. The kitchen smelled of fried rosemary and garlic, and there was already a baked turkey, cranberry sauce, and green beans with almonds on the table, a menu suspiciously reminiscent of Thanksgiving. But it was far from November, and to be honest, I had nothing to thank for. Mom scurried between the stove and the table, pretending not to notice my surprise. Liana and Jason were already settled in the living room. The children were chasing each other with screams and laughter, as if this house had been theirs for a long time. I took a deep breath and took off my coat. It seemed that everyone was waiting for my appearance, but no one said anything. We just looked at each other, hiding our eyes, as if there was an invisible secret in the room that I still had to get to. "Julia, honey," Mom said, putting the last dishes on the table, "you're just in time. Everything is ready." I nodded. Without a smile. She came over to the table, helped set up the dishes, and we all sat down to dinner. The conversations were strained, as if everyone was trying to maintain a mask of politeness. Liana was talking about the children's school, and Jason was talking about the difficult situation at his job. Dad, as usual, was muttering something about taxes. I was silent, watching. They weren't playing at being a warm family, they were portraying unity for a scene that, as it turned out, I had to complete. When dessert was served, pumpkin pie, one of those that my mother baked only for big holidays, everything became clear. "Julia," my mother began, and there was something strained in her voice, like a string about to snap, "my father and I, and Liana and Jason. Well, we were discussing an idea. An option that could help everyone." I put my fork on the edge of my plate and looked up at her. "We thought," Liana said, "that maybe my family and I could move in with you temporarily. Until it gets easier with the money. Just for a couple of months. There's plenty of room here. The kids would be sleeping peacefully upstairs, and we wouldn't be bothering you." It was like being doused with icy water. My heart clenched as if from a cramp, but my voice remained steady. For the first time in all this time, I felt anger rising inside, not fear, not guilt. Quiet, restrained, but clear. "No," I said. "Absolutely not." There was silence. Even the children, as if sensing the tension, fell silent outside the door. "What do you mean, no?" Liana broke the silence first. Her voice trembled, but there was indignation in it. "You live here alone, Julia. You have 4 bedrooms. We live in a 2-room apartment with 3 children. This is my house," I replied. "And I decide who lives in it." "But you're our daughter," her father put in, and there was a hint of reproach in his voice. "Don't you want to help your sister? You live here." I endured everything, the visits, the noise, the invasion of my personal space. But that's enough. This is my border. Mom put her napkin on the table, her face turned pale. I didn't think that my own daughter was capable of such cruelty. "You sound like a stranger." "I feel like a stranger," I replied, "in my own house." They looked at me like I was a traitor. It was as if I was the one destroying my family, not them invading my life without permission. I got up without waiting for the end of dinner and went to my room. Tears came, but did not come out. Instead, there were only clenched fists and a breath stuck in his chest. The following days were icy. Not a single word at dinner. Not a single question tonight. Mom stopped cooking, and Dad didn't say hello. There was an ostentatious politeness in the house, bordering on contempt. I didn't mind. The silence was much nicer than the fake concern. I would come home and sit in the car for a long time, listening to the rain on the roof. The house was no longer a house. He became a battlefield where a hidden war was going on. And then something happened that would have been impossible to imagine even in the most absurd dreams. It was a normal working day. I stayed late at a meeting and then went to the supermarket. In the evening, at about 7:30, I drove up to the house. The lights were on in the windows, and the rain was whispering on the glass, as always. I took out my keys and went to the door, and she froze. The key didn't come in. I tried again. He didn't turn around. The lock did not respond. It was as if the door no longer knew me. I knocked. Loudly. A minute later, Mom's face appeared in the window. She peeked out without opening the door completely, just opening it on a chain, as if I were not a daughter, but a stranger. "Yes?" "What is it?" she asked, almost without emotion. My key doesn't work, I said. What's going on? We changed the locks today, she replied calmly, even somewhat lazily. We decided that it would be better this way. Liana and her family will be moving soon. My mind was trying to catch up with the meaning of her words. It refused to believe that I, the mistress of this house, was standing in front of my own door in the rain, and that my mother, who had kept me at a distance all my life, was now finally pushing me out the door. You can't just kick me out of my house, I gasped. It's crazy. My father appeared behind me. His face was tense but determined. We were thinking, Julia, he said, you spend most of your time at work anyway. And Liana has children. They need space. We all think it's fairer that way. You're crazy, I whispered. It's illegal. You have good money, Mom said. You can get yourself something better. We'll stay here. Like a family. I looked at them through the cloudy glass of the rain and felt nothing else. No rage, no resentment. Just the emptiness. They actually decided that I would retreat. That I'll swallow it again, as always. That they have the right to decide for me. But I wasn't that Julia anymore. Okay, I said. I'll spend the night at the hotel. And we'll talk tomorrow. I'll have time to think about it. They nodded, relieved, as if everything was settled. I turned around and went to the car. The wind picked up the drops and beat them in my face. I got behind the wheel, turned on the headlights and drove away, feeling the fire begin to rise under my skin. They thought they had won. But that wasn't the end. That was the beginning. My night at the Roswell Inn started with nothing. I was standing at the window, looking at the glow of the neon sign reflected in the wet asphalt, and I couldn't sit down or lie down. The room seemed too alien, too sterile. The white sheets, the glass table, the single lamp in the corner, everything seemed to have been specially created in order to emphasize my transience, my isolation from familiar reality. But despite that, I felt strangely relieved. I was no longer inside that false family, breathing the same air as the people I had allowed to drive me out of my own home. I sat on the bed, took off my shoes, reached for my phone, and dialed the lawyer's number, James Brennan. He handled my divorce proceedings and proved himself to be a man who knows how to protect borders. He had to write to voicemail. It was Saturday evening. It was unlikely that he was at the screen. I left a brief but firm message. James, this is Julia. My parents changed the locks in my house. Without permission. They won't let me in. I need to figure out what to do. Call me as soon as possible. I hung up the phone and started pacing the room, as if I could clear my mind in circles. I imagined them sitting on my couch right now, smiling, discussing where to put a crib for Lucas, how to allocate rooms. They were probably congratulating themselves. The plan had worked. Julia left. Julia conceded again. No. Half an hour later, the phone rang. James. Julia, are you okay? He began without any preliminaries. I'm at the hotel, I replied. They changed the locks. Without warning. They said it was now a home for Liana and her family. Like, I don't need that much space. He paused, then said firmly. It's illegal. No matter who they are to you. Do you have documents for the house? Everything is in the cloud. I can send you copies. No need. You can call the police. Right now. This is a violation of private property, trespassing, and possibly even an attempted seizure. Write a statement. I'll be there if you need representation. After talking to James, I didn't even feel anger, but pure, cold determination. I was no longer the kind of woman who gives in, freezes, swallows. At 9:30, I went to the police station. The officer on duty, a tall man with short hair and a tattoo on his neck, Listen to me attentively. I showed my driver's license and house documents. He nodded silently, made copies, and then asked, "Do you want to apply?" "Yes," I replied. I wrote the words clearly, not with a trembling hand. Address, situation, details. At some point, I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of what was happening. My parents. Arrest. House. The chain on the door. It all sounded like fiction. But on paper, everything became real. I got back to the hotel around 11. I tried to take a shower, but the water was running too hot or too cold, as if even the plumbing didn't know what I wanted. I wrapped myself in a towel, lay down on the bed and tried to fall asleep. Around midnight, the landline phone by the bed rang. I shuddered and sat up. The voice was male, tired. "Miss Richards? This is Officer Daniels from the Portland Police Department." "Yes." "I'm listening. We have arrived at the address indicated in the application. Your parents resisted and refused to leave the house voluntarily. They behaved aggressively towards the staff and are now detained." I was silent. I wasn't shaking. I didn't cry. I just stared at one point on the wall. "Thanks for letting me know," I said. "Can I come in the morning?" "Of course. They are under administrative detention. We can issue a release under obligation if the conditions are met. I'll be there in the morning." After the call, I turned off my mobile. While it was on, the screen was bombarded with calls from Liana, from Mom, from Dad. One by one, like drops falling from the ceiling in an overly quiet room. I turned off my phone, put it aside, and closed my eyes. The morning at the police station began with the smell of disinfection and footsteps on the linoleum. The parents were sitting in a small room behind glass, under supervision. Mom looked older, with dark circles under her eyes and a disheveled hairstyle. Dad looked away, avoiding my gaze. I was standing in front of him, and everything inside me was stone. The officer led them out. "They can be released today if you agree to withdraw the application," he said. I looked at my parents. "I'll withdraw the application on one condition," I said. "Today they are taking all their belongings and leaving my house. Completely. No exceptions." They exchanged glances. Mom pressed her hands to her chest. Her face trembled. "Julia," she whispered, "you don't really want us to." "Yes, I do. And yes, seriously." Dad looked away and nodded. "Okay," he said. "We'll leave." When they were released, Liana was already waiting in the parking lot. She rushed to them, hugged them, wiped tears from Mom's cheeks, and held Dad's arm. Then she turned to me. There was no pain in her gaze, just rage. Pure, confident rage. "You're not our sister anymore," she hissed. I didn't answer. We drove to my house in silence. I went in first to make sure nothing was touched. They followed me without saying a word. Mom was silently packing her things. Dad was putting books in boxes. Everything happened quietly, mechanically. They were ready in an hour. When they walked out the door, I didn't stop them. She didn't ask where they were going now. She didn't offer any water. She didn't offer to say goodbye. I just stood on the porch until their car disappeared around the bend. And only then did she call the locksmith. I changed the locks. Every single one of them. And I installed a new alarm system. This time, forever. The message came in the early morning, when I was still lying in bed, not having had time to fully wake up. The phone's screen lit up with steady light, cutting through the gloom of the bedroom, and I reached for it without looking. One short notice from the mother: "We don't consider you part of the family anymore." Not right. Don't call. You're nothing to us anymore. I've read it 3 times. Not because she didn't believe him, but because she didn't feel what she might have expected from him. No pain, no anger. No heaviness. Only a strange, deep, unusual calm. It was as if other people's expectations had finally stopped breaking into my life. I put my phone on the bedside table, wrapped myself in a warm blanket and allowed myself to lie down for another 10 minutes, listening to the morning silence. It was as clean and dense as the first snow. There were no footsteps behind the wall, no shuffling on the floor, no voices muttering in the living room. Just me and the slowly waking house. And it was wonderful. When I came downstairs, the kitchen smelled of freshly brewed coffee. I put the cup under the horn of the coffee machine, watching as drops of golden liquid trickle into the ceramic mug. There was no further criticism about organic milk. No one stood behind me to condemn that I was buying almonds again instead of regular ones. I took strawberries and Greek yogurt out of the fridge, sat by the window and happily ate my breakfast, enjoying the fact that I no longer had to please anyone. The day dragged on slowly, as if the very air in the house had taken on my new condition, the condition of a woman who no longer owes anyone anything. I arranged the books on the shelf alphabetically, not hearing any comments about strange habits. I turned on my favorite Chelsea Wolfe album at full volume, and no one came out of the bedroom asking me to turn off that noise. I even left the plate in the sink for later, just because I could. In the evening, I lit candles, turned on the lamp in the corner of the living room and sat down with a book. The curtains were tightly closed, and a cozy cocoon of light, smells, and rustling pages was created inside. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a guest in my own home. I didn't feel the eyes on my back. I didn't hear any appreciative remarks or offensive grumbling. I didn't expect someone to come in and disrupt the delicate balance that I had been learning to create for years. I was just there. In their own space. In my life. Sometimes I found myself remembering voices, noises, smells of food that wasn't cooked by me, footsteps, whispers, other people's music, other people's children, other people's desires. These memories seemed like stale air in a closed closet. It was all there, and it's gone. And even though in those days it seemed to me that I should be softer, more compliant, kinder, now I knew that kindness should not cost you yourself. And silence shouldn't be a luxury. The next day I went to the park. It was an ordinary Sunday, but even the wind in the treetops seemed different. I sat on a bench, watched a dog chase pigeons, and a child eat ice cream with his chin dirty, and I felt like I was part of a world where I finally didn't have to pretend. I wasn't smiling for the sake of peace, I was just in it, naturally, honestly, calmly. When I got home, I noticed that the light on my answering machine was blinking. A couple of calls from Liana, one with an unknown number. I deleted them without listening to them. I no longer need explanations, excuses, or attempts to convince me of my own cruelty. I've been living in other people's scripts for too long, too often accepting roles I didn't belong in. I changed the locks again. This time I put smart ones with a code access. Not out of fear. On principle. It was my way of telling myself that no one else would go where they didn't belong. My house has become a temple of my peace. And I guarded it not as property, but as a fragile but hard-earned right to be myself. It's been a few weeks. Mom didn't write anymore. Dad didn't call. Liana, according to rumors from a mutual friend, moved into an apartment closer to Jason's work. I didn't try to find out more. I wasn't interested. Everything that needed to be known had already happened. Sometimes, when I turn on the light in the evening or put the kettle on, I find myself waiting by inertia for a voice from behind. But the silence is still thick, and it's not scary anymore. She's my choice. And every time I pour myself a glass of wine or open the window to let in some air, I feel like I'm home. I'm not just physically back, I found a space where I can be without a mask. I didn't destroy the family. I just refused to be her victim. I didn't reject my loved ones, I rejected the injustice that pretended to be closeness. I didn't break the bonds. I tore out of myself what was making it difficult to breathe. Sometimes you have to pay for your freedom with loneliness. But if loneliness is a world where you're respected, where you're heard, and where you're your own voice, then it's not loneliness. This is real peace. And it is in this tranquility that I now live. Every day, every minute. No regrets. Without fear. Without shame. I'm just living, for real.